still haven't seen any problems. Any problems at all?
All good so far? All right, let's start. So, today, ADD workshop is about VRay, specifically VRay on Rhino, right? So we're talking about rendering. Does anyone have experience with rendering? I'm including other software as well, not necessarily VRay. Hands up. Yeah? So you know pretty much what we're talking about, right? We are in architecture school, so we are creating 3D models all the time. That's nowadays, especially. I mean, this has been changed over a few decades now, but this is basically how nowadays we start designing. We need a 3D model. Most of the times we have a site model where we need to operate as designers, and then from there we start to build our 3D model. It doesn't matter which software we use to build this 3D model. Each software has its sort of like unique approach. Today, since we're working with Rhino, we are basically assuming that Rhino, being the most used software, especially even in an academic setting, VRay will be kind of like the ideal approach for us to kind of like tackle the rendering item. The way I want to break down the lesson today is giving a bit of an introduction to the software, to the terms, to why indeed we chose VRay. Then there will be a super quick software overview. I'm going to open an example file, a file that is pretty much set up. It won't be exactly the same file that we'll be working today. It will be a slightly different one, because I don't want to use exactly the same thing. I want to leave it also a bit open to you when it comes to the exercise, to try different things if you manage. So follow the principles that I'm showing on the screen, but why not? Try something different, get different results. This is how you get to learn the software at best. And then there will be this practical exercise which will take on 95% of our class today. So you'll be following step by step what I do. Certain settings, as I previously mentioned, you'll be left on your own in like finding the right settings, the like lighting and materials and all the things we're going to talk about. It will get at some point it will be up to you on how you want to have your object looking like. But what is important is that you learn the principle through these exercises, and I will come to conclusions. So as I said before, there will be breaks. So I'll try to be able to walk around and help pretty much everyone. It is good that the class today is limited in numbers compared to University of Manchester where we used to be, right? So this also helps me better manage the entire session. Starting with a question that I was starting posing already, like why VRay? So VRay is one of the most adopted software, especially in the architectural industry, right? So here we are in architecture school. There are so many rendering software, and VRay is definitely one of the most used ones. It's so universal that not just rendering companies use it. So professionals, right? They make our job out of the use of this software, but also students can get the most out of this software. So that's the reason why we are teaching it to you. It's a professional software. And at the same time, I would say there is an overall strategy within ADD and the number of software that we teach you over the year. There is a small portion of that relates to rendering, visualization, and we chose to use VRay. Plus, there's going to be a few more sessions over the over the year, maybe second semester, which is going to be more towards, say, like Lumion or Enscape. So it will be sort of like a more immersive way of experiencing visualization rather than a more professional way. That being said, another great aspect and strength of VRay that came over the years is that by the fact that many professionals are using it, it's a software that started to work as an add-on, as a plugin on many platforms. And believe me when I tell you that it used to be not as universal as it is today. Especially today we're talking about VRay on Rhino. VRay on Rhino used to be an issue till a few years ago. Even when I was studying, it was looking completely different to all the other VRay plugins that were used on different softwares. And that was because they basically in the company, there were different teams that would work on different plugins and develop them almost independently. So VRay for Rhino specifically fell a bit behind, but now it's catching up and they all pretty much look the same. So this is also a good point to take into account when perhaps today we're using it in Rhino, but you might want in the future to, maybe you're using a lot of Revit. I know some of you do because of the atelier you're in, for instance. So it might be the occasion for you to start explore VRay on Revit and you still have some basic knowledge of how VRay works. It won't look exactly the same. It will, in a way, like mimic the interface of the software you're using it on, but at the same time, the basics, then the basic principles will pretty much remain the same. And so this is another aspect to take into account, and I think that it made sense to have you guys learning these visualization software instead of others, right? Another interesting aspect and reason why I feel like this software is particularly verse to be taught in an academic setting to students as you are, is that you can get to beautiful, realistic visualization. I mean, it won't be straightforward, right? Like there are rendering companies that are making tons of money around that. So don't expect like in one day to get to this level, right? But you can get to do some realistic visualization pretty quick, pretty fast. So and at the same time in a professional manner. So understanding what you're doing and why you're doing is not just random. It's not just all behind the hood, like the software is doing it for you. But at the same time, you can get to some very nice and interesting conceptual drawings, like accents, diagrams, something that in an academic setting we use a lot. You use a lot to communicate to your professor, your tutors, right? The messages you want to convey with your design. I'll try and manage within these 3 hours to show you a bit of both approaches, right? I think this will be beneficial to you. So we'll start with a more sort of like realistic way of representing the space, but then we'll also move into something more abstract. Talking about a few of the main items that are defining the way we use VRay. When we are considering rendering reality, representing reality, right? You don't have to imagine something completely detached from what analog tools has taught us over the years. So you will find many similarities, and I'm kind of like excited to see those of you who perhaps have been passionate about photography. Indeed, finding some similar terminology, right, in the settings, and therefore like being able to connect immediately with the software, to link to the software and say, okay, maybe, like exposure value, what does it mean? Maybe I've been taking some pictures around and I've been passionate about photography, and so I can relate to the software and I do already understand a bit of the logic of it. Then we'll be talking about lighting, which is super important. We know that with no lights, right, someone used to say with no light there is no space, right? There is no representation of geometry until that's hit by the light. If you think about all theories about Louis Kahn, for instance, about like how light is bouncing on different materials and rendering reality in different ways, that's kind of interesting, and this is completely true, and it's an interesting way to realize how true this is while you start learning how to render. So we'll study different types of lighting. For those of you who have worked with Rhino before, and I hope it's the majority of you, because we're taking it for granted today, that you know pretty much how to navigate the software, how to orbit around, right? Just basic commands, but you need to have that bit of knowledge. For those of you, then you know that there is a preset sun that you can find inside Rhino, and then by moving that sun, defining the azimuth of that sun, you're also defining the way the light is hitting your space, your geometry, your object, your building, right? So this will be one first approach. We will have this kind of direct link and connection between the physical sun that is present in Rhino and the one that we get into VRay. And we can control through VRay viewport. Then we'll get a bit more in detail with the use of HDRIs. HDRIs are images that also, they're not just flat images, flat pieces of information that gives you like pixels and that's it, and can be used as backgrounds, but they are images from which I can capture the quality of the lighting, right? So there is a specific format that is giving me information about where the light is coming from. So we'll be using them. I'll show you what's the process to bring them in to get to a completely new level of realism that wasn't possible, as I mentioned before, till years ago, where we didn't have that option in, for instance, in VRay for Rhino. Right? Now we have it. And then we'll be talking also about materials, which is of course, as architects, this is important. Either we decide to take on a more kind of conceptual and abstract way of representation, or we're trying to be realistic. This is still relevant. I'll show you, how to create a new material from scratch, how to grab materials from the library. There is a library that is coming with VRay. You don't need to do anything; it's there already. And then you can also customize that library. A bit of a process, which we'll be looking at later, so don't focus on this too much for now, but it's just to tell you that it's a very straightforward process. It's literally like 1, 2, 3 steps, and you get your material in the scene, and you get it applied to the geometry. And you can immediately start rendering that scene and having the material reflected on the geometry. Then there's been, I wanted to have a couple of words on a few items that have been introduced in the very few last versions of VRay. One is VRay Vision. So the overall strategy of the company, I don't know if you heard, but so VRay is coming from Chaos Group. Chaos Group is the name of the company. So Chaos Group recently started to collaborate with Enscape, right? I feel they bought it. So I feel like the overall strategy of the company is to get into more and more sort of like full immersed type of experience when it comes to rendering. They are moving towards real-time rendering more and more. While once upon a time it used to be like I do whatever I feel like I need to do. I guess the light, and then I hit the render button, and let's see what happens. And after an hour, I come back and I realize that it's screwed, right? And I have to start from scratch. Now it's not that anymore, right? We're gonna make use, even today, of the real-time rendering for most of the time. We wanna see real-time changes. This is how we work nowadays. And VRay Vision is a new platform built in, right? Coming with VRay, that is giving everyone the opportunity to run this even faster. Maybe with a lower resolution, so that we are not really using it today. This is not giving us back many information about how the lighting is working, how the image is being composed through the passes. And therefore we won't use it much, but this is something that I feel like can really comes at hand to you specifically when you're trying to render something you want to be quick. That's the answer. Chaos Cosmos, super useful. There is a technical problem. I'm gonna come to that into a minute. I will be able to show you what Chaos Cosmos is, you probably won't be able in this specific portion, which will be at the end of our talk, our exercise, you won't be able to follow step by step just because there are a few extra steps that unfortunately can't be accessed by these machines. Like you need to create your own account. But basically, what's happening is that, once again, back in time, a few years ago, it would have been really difficult to find free resources online in terms of 3D models, HDRIs, textures. Now you have a built-in library, which looks really good, by the way. It's not a crappy one. It's a really good one. Some of you might have heard of Megascan's Unreal Engine. Okay, we're not at that level, but in general, I think this is great, especially for you. And it's free, and you can download it in the software. You can download each asset in the software, bring it in with the button, and then hit the render button. You don't need to add texture or anything. Everything is already texturized, as you see it in the previews, in the thumbnails here. So free 3D models, basically, yes. And this library is constantly expanding, right? It's a cloud-based library. So there will be a direct connection. You will need to have your internet working, right? But there will be a direct connection to the forum, the community, people who are constantly building on this and adding new items. And if you are registered to, well, you don't have your Rhino license. I'm not expecting any of you to have a Rhino license at the moment, unless it's an educational one. That might come with the educational one as well, but for sure with the professional one, you get weekly or monthly updates, and some of them are also related to like the library that's been enriched with new material. This is the only issue that I anticipated, is that you will need to create your own account, which is completely detached from the fact that you have a license or not. It doesn't depend on that. You just need an account, you just need to create it. And I'm afraid, like here, it won't be possible because you don't have admin rights on this computer. But for those of you who are following from their own laptops, that's something that you might eventually want to try on the fly at the end of the session, right? So once you create your profile, you should be able to link Chaos Cosmos, this is the name, right? Chaos Cosmos, which is this library connected to the cloud, and be able to download on the fly models into your scene to populate it, to make it more realistic, basically. Is there any question on the introduction, on what I just said? All clear so far? Okay, so cool, because now we're going to jump into the software. We're going to open the software. It's still a bit of introduction because I don't want you to open yet. I mean, it's fine if you open it already, but I don't want you to follow what I'm doing on the base model. The base model is there. We're going to get to it in a second. But before, I just want to show you how, not a finished model, but a model where lighting's been set up, materials have been assigned, pretty much how it looks, right? And how fast VRay render is. So, all right, so yes, the model that I shared with you looks different from this one. I'm completely aware of that. I'm just gonna open the asset editor for VRay, not doing anything special. You'll see a lot of items listed in here, while when we start, it will be mostly empty. And I'm going to run the VRay interactive render. So this is interactive. If I click on it, I'm going to get a second window. Now it's calculating light, I hope. I hope this is not the final result. Is it? Let me check the lighting. It might be that the light get turned off by default. Okay, interesting. This might be related to. Okay, it just cannot find the right path for an HDRI. So I'm just assigning one on the fly. You understand more of what I'm doing later on. But basically, yeah, we have our model mirror on the screen, and we see a real-time visualization of it. So there is a bit of water here, a bit of grass. If I come closer, I can start see the grass appearing here, the water. There is light coming from an environmental light type of image, which is once again the HDRI we'll be talking about later on. I do have items here that are hidden and I can turn on, like a series of lights, for instance. So if I turn on these lights, there is like few lighting spheres in the garden, and you see how this should be around the swimming pool, yeah. And you see how immediate it is, right? It just basically it's happening real time. Of course, like it's taking a bit. That also depends on the power of your computer. I do believe that these computers are really good, so you might have like quite quick response from them, faster than mine. But at the same time, there are little tricks that we can do for these to display better and faster, which I'm gonna show you in a bit once we start to work with our base model. Any question on this so far?
Yeah, the yellow vertical lines, they're not showing up on the, are they proxies?
These yellow...
No, on the model window. The yellow vertical lines.
Oh, do they look yellow? They are green.
Oh,
so that's a weird way of VRay to tell us that there is grass applied on those surfaces.
I thought they were proxies.
And that's the direction. It's just the direction of the grass. It's out of scale. You can't do much about it. It's just a way for the software to indicate to you that you apply the 3D grass on it. That's a first system that we're gonna look at when we start working with our model. And so you see how VRay built it, but it's just a preview. It's not real geometry. As you can see, like if I click in here, I try to select it, there is nothing. Okay. Any other question? I'll say we can move on. So, if you haven't done it yet, I think that could be helpful. Please try and get to the link where I'm sharing the screen. I'll suggest you to do it. So I'm gonna show it again, like where the link is, so you can connect to the Teams call, right? And I'm closing these files for now because we don't need it anymore. It was really like just to show you a bit of what we might get by the end of the session. Doesn't have to look the same, right? But that's just an idea. So once again, if you manage to enter Moodle and you check for ADD Moodle page, all right? Instead of going to weekly workshops, which is where you got before all the materials, the download, the folder you downloaded, this time you go to ADD tutorials and you click on this button here, attend tutorial. This will link you to the Teams class, okay? And you can follow from that. Just make sure your mic is off, your camera is off, whatever, and just keep it on the screen. Okay, nice. I think we are ready to start. So all of you should have had this folder called 00 base model, and you have a base file here you can open. Let's give Rhino some time. All right, this scene is nothing special, nothing more than just a common sort of like villa. type of building. We built that on purpose for this exercise. But I would suggest everyone, once you're done with this session, to start exploring exploring VRay and start to drop your own geometry instead of using this model and see how it looks. That's a good exercise to start get on the software. So yeah, nothing special. The good thing about this, everyone should notice here, is that the layers are quite well organized. Something that doesn't happen often, especially within these walls, right? So keep in mind that when you are rendering, and this also happens when you are sending your model to someone who's supposed to render it, first thing they're going to ask is, can I have like clear organization of the layers? Because the way you assign geometry to layer is going to affect the way you work then when you're on your rendering engine, right? And the time is going to take you to clean up, to reorganize a layer, to reassign eventually certain geometry to certain layers. So I have a series of layers here. It's quite self-explanatory what is in there. I have glass, water, grass, and if I turn this off, I'll have certain items that gets hidden, right? I don't have any lights yet, but it's an empty layer that is telling me, okay, probably that if there's going to be any light, I want to assign it to this layer. All right, cool. Now, the very first step is, if you used Rhino before, you know that Rhino has a default rendering engine that is built in. It's not the best. Sometimes it's good. It's enough to get to good level of representation. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a professional one. It's definitely not adopted by professional renderists. But there is this option. You can render in Rhino without using any other external plugin. Therefore, by default, Rhino rendering engine, if you hit the render button, will be set to Rhino rendering. I think like this is for most of you. And so it is up to us to tell the software, wait, I want to use VRay instead. Okay. So if you come here, up here in the top bar, you get render menu, you get this drop down menu, and down close to the bottom, you have current render. Normally this is, as I said, this is set to Rhino render. Is that the case for you guys? Someone yes, someone no, it depends. Okay, so if it is, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that VRay for Rhino is checked. Okay, some of you might then get your interface populated by little bars that are showing all the tools that are related to VRay. I'll suggest everyone to make sure to anchor like these bars to your user interface. Like they will be all kind of floating around like this. I'm using VRay all. They all have different names. My suggestion is either to keep VRay all or VRay compact, right? Which is a compact version of what you have in here with less tools, just the most important ones. And then you can drag and like attach it to your user interface. Normally I keep it on the top. So when you move it around, just showing again, and you get close to some area of the user interface where you have other tools, you get this blue line coming up and it's telling you, okay, here's where you're going to anchor it. Is it fine with you? If yes, you just drop it and it will happen. Okay. And this is a series of buttons, series of tools that we'll be using. I think pretty much most of what we'll be using is there, even more, right? So you don't need much more than that, honestly. All right. One of the most important buttons here is the very first on the left, which is this one, okay? Which is also called the asset editor. Asset editor basically opens up a series of tools that is like a control window where you can basically set up, organize, and then finally press render and see the result then on a separate window, which is the one you saw before, like this floating window where you basically see the result happening. But this is where you control the result, basically. So if I click in here, I'm going to get my VRay asset editor. You probably don't have this big list, which is just textures that have been applied to the people that you see there. I know I couldn't get you the people with the texture applied just for a reason, like it would have taken forever because of Moodle structure. It wouldn't allow me to add texture to it. Doesn't matter. But I wanted to get you to get these people so you can have them like placed around and get a bit of fancy views at the end. In any case, apart from that, this will look empty. You will have a Rhino document sun. As I said before, VRay automatically connects, right, links to the VRays, to the Rhino sun. Okay, but it's switched off. And then you have geometries, Rhino documented ground plane, it's probably off, and then environmental sky, I'm not even sure you have that, but this will be pretty much empty. How do you work with this asset editor? So up here in the top bar, right, you have series of menus. The first one here on the left is materials. The second one is lights. Then you have a third one, which is about geometry. This is not the geometries that you're working with in Rhino. So just want to clarify because it's important. But it is VRay geometries. So VRay has certain specific features, like we mentioned about the grass before, for instance, right? It's coming from VRay, it's not from Rhino. And this is most likely the place we want to look into when it comes to objects that are appearing in VRay, but they are not in Rhino. Then we have render elements, which is the passes. Passes and channels. Better put, is channels that we. I don't want to anticipate too much, but we'll show a bit of it at the end, because it comes very much at hand when you are bringing your final image into another software for post-production, such as Photoshop. And then we have textures, okay? These is the main settings. And then here we have the rendering button. Your rendering button might not look like this at the moment. If I click on the little arrow here, I get these three options. Most important that you need to know is these two. So the teacup, basically. The teacup with a little hand on it and the normal teacup. The normal teacup is render. So is whenever you're ready to render, you press that, and then you let it render, and that's your final image. The teacup with the little hand on is the real-time render. So what I did before. So I can move around, and then the view will update accordingly. Here, VRay frame buffer is basically what's happening behind the hood. Like in the software, you don't really want to dig into that. So that's fine. You don't need to know about it. What is important though is this, the settings. So if I click on the settings, you see like the interface changes, and I get more information about what type of render I'm doing, what is the engine I'm using for rendering. So is it CPU based? Is it GPU based? Up here, right, engine. Is it interactive? Yes or no? If I switch this, you see normal teacup. Okay. If I switch this off, I also get to choose the quality of the render. Is it medium? Is it low, low plus, low, high? These settings are simplified controls for more complex things that are happening. If I click on this little arrow on the right and I'm opening this panel, right, you'll see that if I scroll the quality medium, low, high, things are changing in here, where indeed it says quality. And it has to do with the subdivision, shading rate, and all of these more complex features. Best to know is just that this is a typical rule. I think all of you should pretty much be aware, unless you never touched rendering before. But of course, if you increase the quality, as well as if you increase the resolution, you're going to increase the final rendering time, right? But you'll get a better image. So it's always about finding the balance. I'm going to keep these to medium for now. And then, remember before I anticipated about photography. I can open camera, and here I have a series of tools that might be indeed familiar to those of you who have owned a professional camera before. We have the exposure value, white balance. Okay, we'll see what they do when we start rendering. Then depth of field effects, it's even more advanced. What is important to show at the very beginning is the render output. So this is the actual resolution you're rendering at. So this is, at the moment, is 800 by 450. The ratio is 16:9, right? We can change this. We have presets here. We can change it to square, picture, landscape, portrait, or we can have it to match the viewport, or we can create our custom one. So if I keep it as it is, but I come in here and change the number, you can do it. Change the number to say 9020, which is one of the typical one. I get 1080, right? Respecting the ratio of the image. This is the typical size of an image that can be displayed on a computer, all right, on an iPad, whatever. Then animation, environment, we're gonna get to environment in a bit. And then all these further features here, we don't bother looking at that now, right? First thing you might be tempted to do is, okay, cool, I switched the render engine to VRay. Now I wanna see how this thing that I have on the screen looks on VRay. So what if I press the render button? Well, first of all, I'll say, let's use, for now, for the sake of this exercise, we'll mainly use the VRay interactive, right? So we can orbit around, we can see different lighting. We don't have to press render all the times and restart the rendering. It doesn't make any sense. So let's use the VRay interactive. I click on it. I get this window, and what do you get? Do you get this? Does it look different? Any of you? Okay. So the reason why there is a bit of lighting set up already is that there's been a bit of pre-work. A pre-work that I really want to point this out because I don't want you then to open a new file and start the scene and get something completely different. Unfortunately, I had to keep it because it's coming with the file. But I don't want you to take this for granted, right? The first time that you might open something, and I'm going to show you.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Mine looks a bit different, actually.
Yours looks a bit different. Interesting. Are you using your own laptop?
No.
No. So that's when I said like VRay sometimes behaves in a different way. But this is cool because it gives me the opportunity to explain why. I'm coming to you and just checking.
The bluish things is all over. US has different color.
That's fine. You just talking about. Yeah. I think it's pretty much the same.
This part
That's fine. It's just about the ground. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's just about the ground. Yeah. Anyone got it completely different? You? Yours is just white, and it's the same file. VRay. So we'll be fixing it. I was expecting some of you to have these issues. Okay, yours looks white. Right. Yeah, but no worries. So if you, where is the perspective? If you zoom out of it, yes. So I'm showing you on the screen. No worries. Okay, I'm showing you on the screen. If I quickly create something in here, like a box, right? Doesn't matter. And let's give it a plane. All right, and I'm rendering. Okay. See, completely washed out, white. Some of you, this is exactly what's happening to you, right?
Yes.
Same. All right. This is because VRay doesn't tell you, but there is this little trick. So VRay has a default lighting that usually comes with it. This default lighting is set to studio lighting. That default lighting that you see in the bluish image that I had before is set to environmental lighting. So it's more for exteriors. That's what I say. It's a little trick, but the way you can fix it is basically when you, I'm closing this, by the way. When you come in here, there is a VRay, I think it's called VRay Change Default Scene. Okay. VRay Change Default Scene. And it asks you, what is the default you want to set up? Is it studio lighting or arc Vs? It's actually called arc Vs, right? That's the environmental one. Based to which one you click, like the next time you open Rhino, that will base the base scene on your last choice. So I set it to arc Vs, and that's the reason why you open that way. If you have it, like those of you who have the white one, maybe it's set on studio.
It wasn't the second one.
Sorry?
It was already set on space.
Well, make sure you click it again.
Oh,
Because sometimes maybe it was left open, and then you need to close the scene and reopen. So you need to close the file and then reopen, and then from there, it should apply the new mode. Okay. So, yeah, I encountered so many people that didn't know this, and every time they started a new file, basically they were reorganizing the settings, they were re-updating the texture for the backgrounds and the global illumination every single time. Okay, because the good thing about this is that VRay automatically adapts the camera settings according to the type of scene you set up. If it's exteriors, it will adapt the way the lens opens and so on. Okay, did you manage to get the scene?
I'm just gonna pause it.
Okay, let's see. Let's give it a minute.
Thank you.
All good? It worked. Cool. Amazing. Let's wait a couple more minutes so we all get on the same page. I'm closing this one and I'm coming back to our beautiful model. Anyone still have issues? All good?
Yeah.
Did it work here?
Yeah, sorry, it's just thinking.
It's thinking a bit. Okay, you just press the button. Let's see. Cool. Amazing. So this is going to save you so much time. You have all the lighting set up. You have no idea how many people I met, and they were like, "Oh, I'm giving up on VRay. It's too difficult to understand because the light looks super messy, like it's washed out. I don't know how to get the sky there." Remember this little trick, and VRay will do it for you. So now, I told you about the only thing that should look different from what I have. Yeah, someone pointed out, oh, I don't have the brownish material, which is not really material, like around the where the ground is supposed to be. Well, this is actually this color because there is no geometry happening here. So I don't know if any one of you noticed it, but does any one of you have any guess on why this is brownish, this is grayish on my model?
One is the ground plane. The other one has an object over it.
Yeah, you spot it. Have you used VRay before?
Yeah, on SketchUp.
Okay. So you can relate. Now they look much closer. That's what I was talking about. Like now they look pretty much similar environment, right? Similar interface. Yeah. Before it was completely different. And the SketchUp used to be way better than the Rhino one for some reason. That's how I started using VRay on SketchUp actually. So that's nicely put. So yes, that's correct. At some point, I think you guys missed it, but at some point on the VRay asset, where the objects are, there is a Rhino document ground plane. It's an infinite plane that VRay, so once again, it's a preview. It's not real geometry. I can turn it on and off. If I click in here, now basically VRay set this ground plane for the entire scene. And it is infinite, so it goes all around till the horizon, right? I can switch it on and off. If I switch it off, this brownish, it's not any material, but it's about the background that I have around me. The background that has been set up by VRay by default when I did the little trick and I did ArcViz. Okay, so another thing is, I mentioned, VRay works with Rhinoceros. That's one way of working out the lighting in VRay. So if I go to the lighting tab here, I'll find my Rhino document sun. Let's click on it. So we turn it on and see how the model changes.
For some reason, the ground plane is also blue on mine.
The ground plane is blue.
Yeah.
You mean, well, mine was bluish as well.
No, yours was brownish, right?
No. I switch it off again. So if I switch it on, now it's white because the sun is on. But before the sun was on, so I show you. It looked blue. This is just, is basically just the general lighting is affecting the diffuse channel. And that's why it looks like it's blue, right? Because there is no sun at the moment. It's almost like nighttime. I know it's not, but not in the background, but it's the global illumination tells me that it's almost nighttime. So if I come in here and I turn on the sun, so this is what I'm getting. Okay? And you know that the sun can be controlled either in Rhino or directly in VRay. So if I open up this little arrow here and I click on the sun, I'm going to find all the tools that I need to control the sun position, the horizontal and the vertical angle, right? At the moment, the custom orientation is off, but you have a little switch here to turn it on. So if I click in here, now I can be the one defining where the sun is positioned. And if I bring this down, so I change the altitude basically, and I bring it close to the horizon, you'll notice that the lighting, the overall lighting is going to change. The shadows get way longer. The overall tone is more orangish. Does it make sense? So VRay works really well with the sun. You then have series of filters to control the size of the sun, the intensity, and so on. I think for now we are happy with what we have. But if anything, it will be up to you to kind of balance, right? Especially when you get other lights in place, to kind of balance the sun exposure. And you can do it with this little with this little number here, this little attribute box, which you, for instance, can turn to 0.5 if you want to diminish the exposure. And you see, basically, this is the intensity multiplier, right? I can increase it, and I can decrease it. Okay, and then why not? You can have fun playing also with the azimuth, with the location where the sun is coming from. Okay, working fine for everyone? Cool. I'm just gonna turn the ground plane off again, just because like all this brightness is a bit too much to me, too much for my eyes. So okay, this is fine. Then let's take a step back. I really want all of you, to get here, because I feel like for most of you, if you never rendered before, this is already kind of, getting to an interesting level. I wouldn't say like it's super real. Of course it's not. There is much more to play with, but it's already something. And if you had to, like show a conceptual render, this might already do, right? Just playing with the light and just show the geometry. This really highlight the geometry. One single material applied to it, doesn't matter, right? Can be more conceptual. But I want you to take a step back. So we just stop for a moment the real-time render. And we move to the settings. Remember I told you VRay uses different engines to render. So it can take on your CPU or your GPU or even both. So a little trick, what I normally do, I check the in-between, and then I click on these dots, and I make sure it's using both the CPU and GPU. So I click in here. In theory, this should make the process much faster, the processing of the image much faster. So if I click in here now, let's see. Yeah, I will say like overall it's faster. It just takes literally like 2 seconds to update, right? And get me a more refined result, something closer to what might be like the end result if I render this. All right, cool. Are we all here? Right? Working for everyone, no weird results. Okay. Nice. So next step, we want to start to add some materials, right? So some materials. How do we do that? We have our material tab. If I click in here, well, most likely you don't have any of this. Actually, you know what? I might just delete all of them. So this is pretty much where you are. If I do re-render this, now people should have lost all the texture. Indeed, they are completely white, you see. This is pretty much where you are, I guess. Some of you have textures. You do have the textures.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, they're coming together then without me attaching. Okay, fine, cool. Anyway, doesn't matter. So you had the texture, and so you had the list of texture in materials. Ah, okay. I should have kept them. Well, too late now. Your renders are gonna look much better than mine. Doesn't matter really. What is important to show you is how do you create a new material. So if you go down here, you get this little, I don't know, it's like a sphere with a little plus next to it. And it says, if you hover on it, it says create assets. You click with the left mouse click button, and you get render elements, geometries, light, textures, materials, pretty much is reflecting, the top bar menu. So I want to create materials. We are not really going to explain all of these settings today. This is very basic, and then you get time to, dig deeper on your own. But the material that I want to create is a generic material. Whenever you're trying to create a new material from scratch, my suggestion is start with a generic one. Generic one has, the base features that every material should have to start with, and then you can add on specific features, which might be like an emissive material. I guess some of you know what an emissive material does. Basically, it will generate light. So it's something very specific. But it's just an overall material where you want to apply a texture, where you want to, or you want to define the color, and that's enough. You just select and pick the generic material. So I'm doing generic, and then I'll be brought to, once again, the material tab, where I have my generic. Generic by default is this gray color. You have a series of channels here: diffuse, reflection, refraction, coat, opacity, bump. The only one that is in use at the moment is diffuse. Indeed, it's blue. So if I click on it and I click on the little arrow, I'll get a little slider to set up the color of my material. At the moment, this is gray. It's fine. I don't change it for now, but I want to show you how I apply this to my object. So there are multiple ways. Okay. So one way, and let me turn. Oh, I'm rendering already. Cool. Yeah. So we're gonna see live how this gets applied. So one way is click and dragging it into the geometry where I want to apply it to. So this is one way. Click, and then this portion of my model turned gray. Okay. Let me do Ctrl Z. Another way is applying it by layer. That's why I told you to organize your layers. So most of the times, if you're planning to render, you organize your layers by materials. So glass, and I put everything that is glass in there, right? So applying by layer is very easy. Is either you drag and drop this time into the layer. So generic to, let's say, pave. Oh, this is pave. Okay, I don't have much in that layer, but you see the result. Other way is right-click on the material and do apply to layer. Same way you can do apply to selection. You select the elements and you do apply to selection. Or apply to layer, and I don't know, concrete, for instance. I click concrete, and this will apply to, I don't have anything in concrete at the moment, so pick the right one. I don't know, let's say generic, which is going to be pretty much everything. And everything turns gray. So in this way, you can also have a combination. Say like, oh, I want everything in generic to be gray, but I don't know, let's say this element here, right? This element in the roof. So for this specific one, I can create a different material, and I can say apply to selection, and that will override the material that I have applied to the layer. But if I go back and then reapply the same one material to the layer, that will substitute all of them, right? You will keep overwriting. All right, and then just to look at what's happening, I can slightly change the color of this material, and I will have a real-time reflection on my model. Okay, all the channels are pretty much self-explanatory. So opacity, you can of course control the opacity of your material. So if I get it to 0, the object doesn't exist, right? Code is a bit more complex. Bump will have a bump texture attached to it, bump map, right? At the moment there is none. But using alpha maps, so there will be grayscale images, they will define the bump texture. So this is sort of like 3D feeling that you can have on top of your geometry. I'll show you an example. So, and this gives me the possibility to introduce you to the library that is built in. So you see there is another arrow that this time points to the left here in materials. If you click it, you're going to open the so-called material library, right? If it's the very first time you open it, you might need to click on download. It will take a bit, like a minute maybe. And we'll start to download all the materials. And here you have a selection of textures and materials. For instance, bricks, color paint, ceramic. You get the emissive materials, right? Glass, which is very useful instead of making your own materials from scratch all the times. You get some presets, basically. Metals. You get some wood and laminate. Some various ones, which are not amazing. And then I believe there is more that you can download from online, or once again, you can use the now famous Chaos Cosmos that I mentioned before to download more. All right. Once you manage to download them, which I think you are still downloading it, but once you manage, how do you bring one of these materials into your scene? There are two ways. One quick way is you assign it to whatever geometry you want to assign it to. So this is one way. Second way is you just drag and drop it into the material tab. So for instance here, I'm going to bring some bricks, I don't know, like this one for instance. I'm going to drag and drop it into the material tab. So did it work? Yes. So it's not assigned to anything yet, but it's there, right? And anytime I can assign it to an object. So that's what I'm gonna do. I probably do just select one wall, which can be anywhere. Let's see. Maybe this one. I don't know how it's gonna look. And then I'm clicking on right-clicking on bricks and say apply to selection. Okay. Not bad. Right? And you see that the bump channel turned blue. So that means, I mean, that's a hint that there is something happening there, that actually that does something to the texture. And if I open it, I see that there is a bump map that is applied to it. So if I click on the texture here, here's my bump texture. And these should give me a feeling, a more real feeling, more 3D feeling of the texture. Probably it seems pretty flat from the distance, but if you get close to it, sorry, from the main view, if we get close to it, we start to see a bit of three-dimensionality. All right? Did you manage to apply that material? How do you apply it on a wall? So you can apply a material in multiple ways. One is you drag and drop the material on that specific geometry. Another one is you select the geometry. You see, like I selected it, and then I go to materials, right click, and do apply to selection. The way I organize the file, I wanted to apply materials, pretty much all materials by layers, which is not, it's a good practice, as I said before. So next step, I'm going to search for some glass. Okay, so I go to glass, and I'm looking for, oops, not this one, but some window glass. So
if I go down glass window, neutral, this is probably what I want. So I'm just drag and drop it into my scene, and then I want to apply these to the glass layer. So right click, apply to layer, and then I'm searching for glass, 04 glass. Cool. Glass. Sorry. You need to choose VRay as your render. So first thing you need to do is go to render, and then you go down here, current render, and you select VRay. Yeah. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. Yep. One second, come to you first.
Sorry, how do I use the scale of the bricks? I think it's just too large.
Oh, you have the same issue. I'm coming to that later. Don't worry for now. Just replace it with another material.
Is it going to be a
Yes, I think.
material here on the side here? Because like, what if I accidentally put the bricks on the door, done too many things, and just cut it, and I cut them like a Control Z? Is that like a way, a thing, or if like redo the whole layer?
You assign different material in geometry, and they will override.
But what if I don't add material to it, or is it like in here since you'll always be bringing?
You always be doing materials.
Okay.
All the reason override material thing, I'll show you. I'll show you later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, coming.
It's not about the final result. It's about issue habits.
I agree.
Cool, let's move on.
All right. I guess more or less we're all here. Some people ask me about, like why the lighting is, why the sun is so bright. Can I adjust it? Like, of course we can. And there are two ways. One, which I showed before. So like if we go to the lighting tab, I can decrease the intensity multiplier. Okay, one thing I can do. Second thing is, and gives me the opportunity to introduce the way we control exposure, is in the camera settings. So if I go to the settings where I have exposure, right, I can control the exposure value from here. This has been set by default when you picked arc Vs, right? The fact that it's exteriors, in theory, VRay automatically set it to be of a certain number to match with the with environment. But you can still come and trick it and say maybe this has to be, oh, sorry, not this way, but the other way around. If you increase it, you will decrease the overall lighting. So from, that was 14 point something, I want to bring it to 15, maybe. And now the light is a bit more controlled. Another thing that we can mention is the textures, how the textures, the sky textures are affecting the lighting system. So if you go down here and check environment, you now have a background environment that is affecting the scene. So if I turn this off, you see that what is left is just the sunlight, which by its own doesn't really look that great. Like we're losing a lot of realism here. It's just the sun. But we're losing how, the colors of the sky and the sky we selected is affecting the overall ambience. So, yeah, not great. I'm showing you a little trick. A little trick is to activate the GI, the global illumination. So if I activate this, now by default it doesn't look great, just because I have no texture applied to it. But if you'll see that if I click on this texture, so what is the texture that I currently apply to my background? If you click it, you'll see that this is, where is that? Sky. So, why is not showing? Well, it's basically, it tells you here what it is. It's a sky, and the sky model is the Hosek et al., which is one of the presets. You have quite a few here. If I change this to overcast, I'm getting a different result, right? I will say either keep it to Hosek et al. Or Pretham et al. I also do like this one. But apart from that, oh, that's the thing. Like right now my texture is set to sky. I can change this, but I want to keep it because that's fine to be my background. What is important is that I match this in my GI, right, in my global illumination. So then what I'm trying to do is to match global illumination with the texture that I apply to the sky. So if I go back to my settings, in here I can click this little texture and I can pick a sky. And now, in theory, automatically VRay should recognize the type of sky that you've been applying to the background and make it the same you're applying to the GI, to the global illumination, right? Indeed, if I scroll down and I look at the sky model, it's still pre-fem at all, okay? That's the one that I assigned to it. And it'll be the same if I select environment sky, environment sky 1. It'll be the same texture applied to. They are linked together. So now I can come back here and I can finally, I should be able to switch this off without that affecting my overall illumination. Well, we'll see actually. So I do this, yes, it worked, but I can tell you that it didn't really work everywhere because there is another channel called reflection. We don't really have much reflection now. Like the only one might be like here in the window, but the window is still not reflecting any background if I turn this off. And the global illumination on its own is not enough to have the same reflections on the reflection channel. Well, it doesn't matter for now, right? But in this way, we can have a neutral background if we wish. So this can be black or any color. This can be red or white. It doesn't matter. The reason why, if I turn this white, but it's not really white, it depends on this value. If I bring this, I do believe, if I bring this to say 10. Oh no, sorry. This is the global illumination. I don't want to mess up with this. It's this one. 10. Yeah, this get wider. 100. Fully white. Okay. This is a bit more advanced. But for now, I think we are fine keeping the texture as our background and keeping these, lower this to 1. So we still have this fake sky happening in the background. All right with that? This is a bit more technical, but I felt like I had to show it. Next thing that I want to show is, let's move on faster with the materials. So my generic material, I can apply it to generic, indeed. Default, apply to layer, concrete, and maybe I can even apply it to this wall, which I don't want to have these weird bricks wall here. So next thing I want to do, I want to introduce water. So if you move in here, you have a liquid menu. Then you can open up, and you have a series of presets for water. I think I'm going to use the first one. That should work. So waves 801, 200 centimeters. I'll bring it in. And then once again, right click, apply to layer, water. Oh, okay. So maybe here the bump is a bit too much. If this is a swimming pool, that's probably too much. Let's see the difference with this one, for instance. Apply to layer, water. Not better. So I think I'm gonna stick to this one. Or let's check waves procedural. Waves procedural is a different way of, it won't be based necessarily on a bump map that you apply to it, but be based on like a noise map, something procedural that you can set up inside the software. So apply to layer, water. At the moment, the map is really difficult to see it, but it's happening. So it's okay. I think I'm gonna work on the first one, which is the one that gets the closest to what I want. So apply to layer, water. And then, yeah, you get an overview of what is the kind of like the map that is acting on top in terms of the bump. It's maybe a bit out of scale, right? So what I can do, I can come to the bump map here, open it, and I do have a bump map. I do have an amount. If you feel like the waves are too high, that's probably where you want to go and tweak a bit. So instead of being 0.5, maybe this can be 0.1. Why not? Right? 0.1, and you see this will affect the overall result. But what you could do, you could also enter here in the texture space, getting a preview of what it is like. And open texture placement, open UVW placement. And here's where you're going to control the scale of this map. Okay? There's a bit of kind of like Inception situation. You need to dig down levels. This is probably among the trickiest thing that we're gonna look at today. Otherwise, it's pretty simple, right? VRay, you can achieve pretty good results in a very straightforward way. But you'll see, and some of you have noticed this before when you were trying to apply, say, the brick texture to certain items, and the texture was super stretched. You'll see that certain times you really need to dig into UV mapping and understand how you remap the texture, right? On top, unfortunately, it doesn't always come automatically perfect and fine. Like in this case, I might want to control the number of times this is repeated so that I can control the scale of it. So if I press 10, you see that all these little waves, they become finer and finer. This is maybe not that great. If you ask me, like, it's still not what I want. Maybe I bring it to 5 and I jump back to the bump amount and I do 0.1. So this is getting closer to what it might look like actually. You can play with opacity, of course. You might want to introduce a bit of opacity. Not too much, because there is not much to see underneath. I mean, this is just a very rough model, right, made for the exercise. But let's say if I now decide to add some sort of cool lighting underneath the water, that will show. All right, I think this looks better, right, than before. Before it looks like it was open sea. Now it's more of a swimming pool, and you can see that the repetition changed. Right, the way that the bump texture is repeated on top changed, and it got tiled differently. So this is for water. Next thing I want to introduce is grass. I think there was a question. Is it all good there? All good?
Yeah, sorry. On the previous slide, you said like UVW. How'd you get that window out?
Okay, I'll show you. So I'm doing it for the bump map, but this can be it works for pretty much every channel. If you have a texture applied in a color, it will be the same. If you click on the texture, this will open this window, right? And in here, you want to go to the UV placement source and click in here. Once again, UVW placement slot. And here, you can control the number of times you repeat the texture, so the tiling. You can rotate the texture. You can offset it, right? Move it, which is great, for instance, for the bricks. Like we showed bricks before. So if the bricks, they don't line up with the end of the wall, this is where you want to come. Offsetting, which is basically is just moving the texture, right? So here's where you control the texture. Yes?
What exactly is the difference between background and GI?
So GI is global illumination. Background is the background.
Yeah,
but at the same time, background is...
Background and the sky in GI works the same way, right? So which one is a better option?
The thing is, what I found is that, because they are linked at the end of the day, but what I found is that if you set the sky to be in the global illumination, then you can get rid of the background. It's just this little trick. Because otherwise, by default, VRay tend to get all the other channels from the background, like global illumination and all of that. That's how it set up the file. When you click on ArcVs. Like if you had to do it on your own, it would be you going and setting up each channel. But just by default, when you click on ArcVs and you start with that settings, VRay will populate the scene in a way that basically is getting all those informations from the background. As simple as that. Are we all here? All good? Let's try and add some grass. Okay, so first of all, maybe what I want to do first is I want to bring in a grass texture, which might be this, I don't know, grass B, for instance. Let's bring it in. And then right click, apply to layer, grass. Okay, this is interesting to show you something. Like sometimes you get different geometries, and depending on how the geometry is tessellated, it's a mesh, it's a surface, it's a trimmed surface, right? The textures might behave in different ways, which is really bad, really annoying, and takes us a lot of time to clean up the model. So in that case, what you want to do, there are like few ways of fixing it. It's either going and assign one by one and controlling each texture that is applied instead of doing like by layer. So it's the same applied to all the layer, all the surfaces, mesh, whatever in that layer. You just go about one by one and you create duplicates of the material, and you control the materials in different ways so that they behave properly for each texture. Other ways is you go, for instance, here, this will need to be done in the diffuse channel. You go in here, and once again, you work on the UVW placement, but I'll say one quick way might be maybe if you change the placement type. So instead of being mapping source, you go to environment, I do believe. And that should more or less fix it for all of these. The same will need to be done though, because now what you see is that maybe the diffuse level has been fixed, but the bump level is not. See, like this looks like the moon. Well, this maybe it's a bit finer and it works fine. Let me check. Oh. Mapping also, I want this to be. Let's check screen or cubic, number of repetition. I think this is fine. I'm wondering with 0.1 if this is gonna help. Oh. And I link it. Well, not really. I think this is fine. But basically, you need to do the same thing for. This need to
move up, back again, go to the bump, and then in here do the same with the bump map. So they will need whatever textures are applied to the different channels. If you scale one, a good practice is to scale the other as well, so that will follow. So if I go to texture placement here, I'm checking here. Here. I want to change this to environment as well. Okay, and then I'm going to create a new grass channel. Sorry, a new grass material, which will be number 2. And I'm going to show you why. So, like, this is the base. I wanted some sort of like green color to be the base for my grass patches. Now, I want to create 3D grass on top. So how do I do that? That's not a texture anymore. That's not a material anymore. This is an actual VRay object. So if I come in here and I go to the objects and I create a new asset, geometries, I can create fur, right? This is for the grass or for the fur, depending on you can use it for a carpet,
I'm using for grass here. So I'm clicking on it, fur, and then I can do right click. This time I cannot do apply to layer, so I'll need to select the grass patches first, which I can do, of course, by going to grass, right click, and then select object. And then coming back here, right click on fur and do apply to selection. Beautiful. This is, of course, this is not what we wanted. So you immediately see that there is some adjustment that we need to do. That really depends. Like it goes with the scale of this mention here. It goes with say the units that you're using in your AND file. It might be totally fine at first when you introduce grass in your file. It's not at the moment, of course. So what I want to do here is to reduce the overall global scale. You see it here, global scale says 1. I might bring this to 0.1. So they get really small. And another problem that I have in here is with the density. So I want to change the density, which right now this is set by per area. And I want to bring this, I want to pump this up a lot. So maybe 60 or even more. You can tell. So let's try 600. Much better, right? All the green is pretty much covered. I can also position myself a bit closer. And well, something you can do to have an immediate feedback, faster feedback, is in here you get the chance to select the region if you're going to update the render. So when you don't want to update the entire image like all the times, right? You want this to be faster. You just select the only area that you want to update. So let's say this one, so we can check how the grass looks. So for instance, if I decrease the length of the grass to 1, I have an immediate feedback right in here. So maybe 1 is not enough, maybe 2 is fine, and maybe the density can be even more. Let's bring it to 800. Okay, I think this is fine. I mean, you can tweak it, get it finer, play with the gravity, the bending, all sort of. Just the variance. We're not going to get into details, but you can create very realistic patches of grass. And then we're going to apply a material to this glass, to this grass. So down here you see material, which now is switched off. I turn it on, and instead of known, here I select my second grass material. If I click back on this region button, I'm going back to rendering my full scene. Cool? Everyone's here?
So could you repeat that step, please?
Which one? The reducing the grass size?
Yeah.
So, if have you applied the grass?
Yeah.
Okay, so once you apply the grass, you get all these settings for it, all these parameters. The very first step that I did, because I, of course, realized that the scale was completely wrong, it was changing the global scale from 1 to 0.1. That worked for me. Might be different for you. Actually not, because it's the same model. And then I also reduced the length. To me, it's a bit too long. And then it's up to you. If you want to change a bit of the gravity, of course, you're going to get, with less gravity, the grass will bend less. You can also control the way it blends in here. You can control the tapering. right? You know pretty much what we're talking about when we say like the tapering of the grass, right? The way it's getting pointy towards the end, and of course you can change the variance, the direction. That has to do with sort of like the wind direction. You can add curves. We're not really getting too much into it. And then last step is in the material. You have this switched off. You turn it on, and in here you select. You have this drop-down menu with all the materials listed, all those that we've been assigning today, and you select the grass material. The number 2, I'll say, because it's the one that we didn't change because of the tessellation issues. Yep.
So can you show how you got to the fur?
So to add the fur, you just I would position myself in the object menu, and then down here, I mean it's not necessary, but I'll do that just to visualize fast and focus on that. I'll do create asset, and in here I'm selecting geometry and then fur.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. So I just want to add a bit more materials. So maybe what I'm doing now is I'm going back to the materials and I'm adding some metal material for the roof part. So it doesn't matter. Like here, remember in the beginning of the session, I said like, just once you understand the process, just be creative. Like bring down your own material, apply them to different layers, see what you come up with, right? There is no prescribed results for today. Yeah. So metal. I don't know. Let's try this one. Aluminium. Apply to layer, and then roof metal. Let's see how it looks. It's okay. And then maybe a aluminium anodized clear, or something clear anyway, that I'm going to apply to window frames. Yeah. And maybe another one, which I'll leave it up to you, really. There is a pattern here. Let's see how it looks. I'm applying these to the fences. Oh. Let's see how it looks. Really out of scale. I mean, the pattern is interesting, but it's definitely out of scale. So, and then you see that I do have an issue here. I mean, you don't need to use the same material. Just showing you again, like I think, like repeating it kind of like helps, because this is a bit of a tricky part where you'll be spending some time. It's like fixing the textures. So maybe in here, what I want to do, I want to make sure that. So I see that there is no texture applied to color, which is good. I don't have to come in here and change the diffuse texture, but I do definitely have to come in here and change the bump. So this is the texture that the software is using to create, like this sort of like knit texture. I'm going to texture placement, make sure this is locked. So if I change the U, the V will follow, and vice versa. And if I change this to 10, now this is repeated 10 times. I don't know if it looks any better, but that's maybe too much. So I'm doing it 4. Yeah, a bit better. Okay, this is pretty much where I am. I quickly want to show you, see if it works on mine. It gave me some issues, but I want to show you vision, which is what I spoke about before. So if I go to VRay, where's that? VRay vision, VRay rendering, then VRay vision. Yeah, it's not working. Oh, it's loading. All right, so basically this is like getting a like a real-time, still like a real-time version of your model, texturize and all of that, but you get to explore it in real time. So it's more of like a video game, right? And then you can apply changes on the fly, and it will reflect in here. But as you can see, it's a simplified version. Like you don't see all the like nice waves in the water. You don't get the grass. So it's just a simplified version. But sometimes it's cool, and you can use it to show, say, some results, some texturized results to your professors. Why not? So this is a VRay Vision. I'm not sure you can run it on. Have you tried to run it on your computers? Sometimes it's a bit, you need to tweak a few things. Yeah, it will take a bit to load. It's in you go to the VRay option. I'll show you. I'm closing it now. You go in here, VRay, and then VRay rendering, and you have VRay Vision. No worries. Not working. It's a bit random to me. It happened like the first 2 times I try and run it, it turned black, and then like the 3rd time it worked.
How do you change the ratio of the text?
The mapping.
Yeah.
Several ways. One is what I was showing. I mean, the most important one is you just say, for instance, this one, the pattern. If it's a bump, you go to the bump. If it's a diffuse channel that you need to change, you go to the diffuse. Same way you click on the texture slot. And when you click on the texture, you go to the repetition. That's how you scale it, right? Before it was repeated only once. So that was the result. And if I show you how it looks, look in here, you see that's actually super stretched. So normally this is how I do. You can change the way you are mapping. So I'm using UV channel for now, which is easy to me because U and V's, vice versa. Like, it's the 2 directions. So I know that, for instance, if this looks super stretched in one direction and not the other, and I want to stretch it only in one direction, I actually get rid of this. I unlock this, and maybe, yeah, I'm starting, stretching it on one side only, right? Versus what I did before, which was like stretching it in the 2 directions. Okay, so important things we still haven't checked. So far we've been using sunlight. I want to show you HDRI lighting. That's cool. It's bringing your model to a completely different level of realism. I want to check Chaos Cosmos, although you can't really use it now, but I want to manage to show you so that at home, whenever you manage to get a Chaos Cosmos profile, you can download assets and play them in this and place them in the scene. Yeah, and then maybe a bit of conceptual render. I don't know if you're gonna make it to see any animation, but it's not really a big deal. I can show you quick how to set it up. And a bit of post-production just done on the image as you render. So, okay, cool. Oh, one last thing because before I forget, is there is an interesting tool which is in the settings, and it's called volumetric environment. It's right here. So settings tab, volumetric environment. You can click on this switch, and this will happen. So this is set by default on aerial perspective, and it becomes evident what it does like if you get farther away. Well, not really too much for now, but it just brings in that atmospheric fog that you have by default. So it brings sort of that realism into the scene. Right now this is based on the Rhino document sun, and the visibility range is set to 6,000. If I reduce this, let me try something like 1,000. You see that this gets more and more foggy. Okay, this is, as I said, it's based on the sun color. If I check none, this just will go by itself. And if I change even that, I'm going to change the atmospheric height to 1,000, and then once again bring down the visibility range to say 100. Oh, 100 is too little, so maybe 400. By the way, you were asking me before about those little lines. You see now they popped up again once we apply the fur. So it's just a preview thing, as you can see. So yeah, you can play with the volumetric lighting. It's sometimes it happened to me that I did some like nice foggy render. If you're building something, if your studio project is in the UK, that might be the case that you want to play with that a little bit. But it's, if you don't exaggerate it, it's also kind of like good to have a little bit of it, just to give that sort of like feeling of the particles in the air. And if you do some like night view with some lights, that's really nice, you know, because you can feel the effect of those lights on the overall environment. I'm showing it here. Maybe what I can do is I can check my sun, bring it down. To almost nighttime. Still updating. Okay. And then I still need though to have the sun in here. Where is the sun coming from? Oh, okay, it's over there. So in a way, you can see that this sort of like environmental effect, the atmospheric effect, is lighting up the scene in a way. So if I go back here and I uncheck volumetric environment, this gets a bit darker as an effect. So this brings realism to it. You can also change from aerial perspective to environmental fog. So this is just fog, and the moment is exaggerated. You can play with the distance, the height, and so on. So I'm going back to aerial perspective, which I prefer. I feel like it's more realistic. Yeah, that was just to show you this aerial perspective thing and the volumetric environment. Let me try to add some some light, so you can see how to add artificial lights as well. You see here I have a light panel. At the moment I only have the Rhino document sun, but if I come in here and I add a new asset, I can select lights, and you have multiple types of lights. You have rectangle lights, you have sphere lights that I like to show, or omni lights, pretty similar. Mesh lights also, which can be directly applied into a geometry, which is what I had before for the swimming pool, right? I'm going to show you a couple of them that you can explore on your own. So rectangle light, pretty self-explanatory. This is a rectangle light. I drop it in the scene, I'm not sure where, so if I don't know where it is, I can right click in here and do select object in the scene. Where is that? Oh, sorry. I'm in render mode, so I'm not able to see it. So if I move to shaded, here it is. Oh, worse. So you see now, here's my light. So maybe I can bring it, say, inside the villa, scale it a bit. And you can start to see some light coming out of the window, which of course you can increase. You can change the color. So with that light selected, I go back to my lighting tab, rectangle light. I'm going to change the intensity to 300. And maybe I can change the color as well. Here in the color, you get a nice option, which is down here. And this is about the temperature. So you can get a warmer tone or a colder tone. Right? And you see the immediate result. Just don't exaggerate with these values. Something that I showed you before. If I create now I don't know, let's do a sphere like I did for the other case. I'm just gonna do, like one of those nice garden lights, like those spheres. So I'm doing a couple of them, maybe different sizes. And I can apply a mesh light to them. So right click, lights, mesh light, right click, apply to selection. Here they are. I'm going to increase the intensity. Let's say 100. Okay. Once again, I can change the color, get it warmer or colder, or a completely different color. Cool. So this is for artificial lights.
Where does the light get inserted? I'm not able to see it.
The light, you can't select it. Are you in render mode?
No, it's shaded, but
What you can do is what type of light is that?
rectangle.
So if you click on rectangle light, with right click, you do select object in scene, you should be able to find it.
It's overlapping.
Okay. Cool. Next, I'm going to switch these lights off. You can keep them there, but they'll be switched off, as you can see. And I'm going to introduce HDRIs, right? You got few HDRIs in your folder. Another interesting tool that is inside the new versions of VRay is the light gen.
and gives you an opportunity to generate new lighting scenarios, either based on what you have on the screen at the moment or like completely new scenarios. If you go to VRay, and then you go to VRay Light, I believe. It's here. No. VRay. What's that? Oh, sorry, it's right here. Light Gen. I completely missed it. Light Gen. And you click it. Okay. It says, do you want to generate lighting for exteriors or interiors? And you get to choose. Now we're working with exteriors, so we will have exterior selected. Then, do you want to use sun and sky or use an HDRI? For now, we've been using sun and sky. So let's say, like, we stick to sun and sky. And I want 3 altitude variations and 3 azimuth variations. That will make 9 variations in total. I'm just going to do that because it's going to be fast. You can increase these numbers. And then I'm going to say, okay, generate the variants. It will take a bit, but it will start to give you basically alternatives for the lighting, which is quite interesting. And these are just a few. But then on the fly, I can pick one, and this will affect the entire lighting system that I set up so far. It will override it, so careful. So if I now turn this on and have this rendered, and I go in here and I double click on this, this should change in theory. It did. It just took a bit. So now this one is applied. Let's try something different, and then wait. This is another lighting. Then I get one which is completely in the shadow, so the sun is coming from the other side. So I'm completely obscuring here, and then I get more of a daylight here, which is also fine. Okay, so this is a quick way to generate different options for the lighting. And you can do HDRIs as well, which is pretty cool. But before, I want to show you how to use your own HDRIs. Okay, I do, no, probably, you can save these light sets, so you can load them if you need next time. You really liked one light set, you save it, and then you can load it next time and you can pick from that. I'm not going to save it for now. I'm stopping this, closing this, and now I'm going to use an HDRI. So this is how I look. Oh, sorry. Let me show you. This is how my scene look at the moment, with, of course, with the sunlight applied to it. But now it's time to use an HDRI as a light source. So I'll stop it. Going back to my asset editor, and like Gen Dome. Sorry, give me a second. Just want to understand where this like Gen Dome, where is it coming from? Yeah, like it's not working indeed. I wouldn't even expect this to be here. Let's delete it. That's something I want to show you now. So, in order to get an HDRI in, I indeed need a dome system, because that image, which is the HDRI, will be mapped around your object in this sort of like spherical or semi-spherical shape, and you will get the light source coming from there. So in here, in the lights, I do have a light which is called dome light. This is what I want to use. So I'm clicking dome light. You see I immediately get this gray background, because at the moment the dome light, there's just a dome, but there is no light attached to it. I can switch off the sun. Everything will turn into darkness, but that's because if I have my dome light selected and I click on this right arrow, I see that there is no texture HDRI apply to my dome. So how do I apply a new texture, a new HDRI to it? Any guess? Exactly. We click on the texture in here. Right click and we say bitmap. So we search for a file. And this brings me to, by default, because I was already linking this file to the folder where my HDRI is being collected. This will bring me to this folder. In your case, you have a folder that you've been downloaded that say HDRI. So you want to navigate to that. I don't know where you have it, in your downloads, maybe. So wherever you have it, you want to navigate to that folder, and you're going to have access to these different HDRIs. I'm going to check the first one, which is exactly the one that we use in the other file that I showed you before, but maybe, I don't know, let's start from the last one.
Did you disable the GI?
Sorry?
Did you disable the GI on yours? Why did it turn dark?
Yeah, even mine isn't turning down.
Yeah.
How did it turn down?
The what? The GI?
Did you turn it off?
No, I didn't. I turned off the Rhino
Oh, okay.
sun. Yeah.
Okay, it's not turning down.
Yeah, turn off the sun.
Yeah. Still.
We put off the sun, but it's not turning down. Why is it?
It's not turning down.
Was it when you were messing with the global illumination?
Sorry?
Was it maybe something to do with the GI earlier, or is that different as to why maybe it's not dark?
No, it shouldn't be. It's just like I turn off the sun. I turn off pretty much every light, but this dome light. Yeah, that's all I did. So let me take a look at your file. Wait, do you still have the atmosphere on, the volumetric light? Yours completely black, which is what we are expecting now.
Yeah, the atmosphere was on. Yeah, now it's dark.
Now it's dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's like. So the atmosphere tends to create that sort of like distributed lighting anyway, because it's distributing the particles in the air. And so even when you have a very dark scene, that tends to light it up. That might be the case.
Really, it shouldn't be in the dark light. The sun's turned off, right? Because it's supposed to disperse the sun light.
But still, I don't know what type of atmosphere you use, but even if you turn off the sun, and you still have the volumetric atmosphere on, that will affect it. So you want to keep it off. You too.
Because this is an aerial perspective.
In volumetric environment.
Actually, if you turn it to environment fog, then the light disappears. So instead of turning it off,
Aerial perspective, if you switch aerial perspective to fog.
environment.
But you don't want to have the fog. So just switch it off.
Yeah.
That was just a little thing I wanted to show you guys because you might want to use it if you have like foggy environments, but you don't need to use it.
Yeah.
Don't light. Ooh. Oh, you don't have any file actually. So you need to go to where you want to download. Oh yeah, it's in this. Is there a folder? he's gonna be in the room now.
Yeah, just in the room.
I shouldn't be there. I can stay here in the meantime. I'm not sure.
Don't mind, we can do it both together.
Are you
Yeah, just
should we do both at 10? I just
it's up to you.
okay, let's do this. I'll come there. I just don't want to do it now because I would not understand. So, okay.
Probably be easy.
Yeah.
What I'll do,
Do you want me to run it through and bring it?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, if you want to.
I'll do it tonight.
Yeah,
After
yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I noticed it. Mistake. I didn't get any glass of water or anything. Last time, if I forgot, I don't remember what it was. Good, but yeah.
yeah, just sort it out tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think we might have something in the afternoon.
We're going to talk about future plans.
Yes, of course. Yeah, we'll have a proper chat.
Let me know.
What do you do? Yeah, I'll drop a checkboard.
Okay, questions, issues before we play with the HDRI. Did you all guys manage to get the HDRI in, the image in? No? Yeah.
Sorry, I turned off the, one second. Wait, here.
Yes? Turn off, okay, everyone turn off the volumetric
It's still bright.
you go to the settings. To do that, you go to the settings. There, and then you go volumetric environment. Okay.
You attempted typing.
Settings.
I matched both of them.
It's off though. I can see it's off.
There were two lectures there.
Okay. Doesn't look easy.
So one is between them.
Which one you get? The same as it is?
Exactly. That's it. I'm going to watch YouTube video. So what? I think you are ready for tomorrow.
Try using the same just to make sure that
You have to work on it.
Use the first
Is
one.
what I'm doing.
yeah, sun off. Okay, anyone else? Questions? Are you all good there?
Yeah.
You have your volumetric environment. Yes, you do.
That is also good. But
You're not rendering it.
what is like you are there, you are in the sense, you are to stick on the upcoming code for the science.
So now it's just the sun. You can switch the sun off.
Okay, what is it you are doing?
You go to the lights menu. Lights. Switch the sun off. Click on okay, and then go check the dome lights. Yeah, you have an apply actually. You go here and
So we were supposed to explication, but then she left us. I'm going to call her today and discuss.
where you download it.
Simultaneously, we have started
Yeah.
portfolio thinking. So basically, say for example,
Cool.
what we're thinking
And then you go, you
with
click on the
formulas
lights.
until they design
Make sure
all the processes is not going to change anything. It might develop, but it won't change. Development will be there. Development will be there till the last things can be updated, but then we decided that we move forward with some things. Designing will kind of keep changing, but then we can have like color themes, like stuff like site and conceptual analysis. No, I mean the ways of representation, the representations are already already done it, but then to organize sheets and stuff like that, I have to email those people. The pages are actually permitted. So, depending on those, it will be determined how much pages per site and actually get. Because currently we have crunched it into a single sheet. But according to me, nothing more than 45. What I've heard is 45 pages. So that is also too much, according to me, because working in those restrictions. So that's the thing that I've heard for the populations as developed one thing in me that I know that for seeing or something, if you have to explain a very complicated thing, it can be done to 10 different images which can be just in a single line diagram. Maybe those diagrams take a little bit less. Those look pretty and then it looks very polished. Because according to me, our design can be done within the yeah, but it is more about I'm not asking about what we are thinking, like students are thinking, and then look at the audience and then result and then think more on it. Because to be very precise, we are at that stage right now that even if it's not for the village, we have a 3D form. And not just 3D form, for names, something very complicated. Because we know how to connect spaces now. What the updates and stuff like that. So, but we don't know the space, as I said, so like I still defend that say working test should be more 10 to 15 or something. I'm planning still yet to discuss with someone. I was thinking to propose something like a connected diagram wherein the spaces will be represented by spheres, and then if you remember at that membrane thing, so now my initial thought was to have only the spheres and then initial thought was that just to have two membranes and just play around with them, but then I've discussed this with someone, but also
most of the times
it kind of
most of the times you guys will use HDRI without really using them as anything. You will just use them to get the lights and then you will switch them off. I'm gonna show you.
So let's go back to this. So my image at the moment looks like this, which is not ideal. So I have two options. Okay, I have two options. One is to increase the dome light, the intensity of my dome light. Guys, attention. Okay. Either I increase the intensity of the dome light, or I can move back to the exposure value and tweak the exposure value here. Maybe bring this to 12. Maybe it will be a bit of the two, right? A bit of the two of them together. So, light. Dome light to 2. And this is starting getting close to what I want. Okay? Doesn't look bad. You can, you can bring in different HDRIs and test them out. So all you do is once again you come back here, texture slot, click, select the folder, and search for another one. Okay, like this time I'm using perhaps the second one and say open. And I will get a completely different lighting. You see how harmonious the colors and the materials get within the lighting system that I have surrounding my my building, right? Okay, so this is how HDRI works, and you will use a dome light for it, just to reiterate. And then you can have your mesh light, rectangle light on, right, still. Okay, or off. Normally with HDRI, you don't use Rhino Sun as well. Like you don't use the two, because then the shadows won't match. They will create an unrealistic result. You don't want to use the two together, right? It's either you're using HDRI or you're using the sunlight. This is important for everyone. There is a website which is really cool for where to get free HDRIs, and is Polyheaven. Here you get, well, you can get a lot of assets, textures, as you can see, also HDRIs. So if you click browse HDRIs, you get even some of those that I provided to you are in here. You can get interiors one and exteriors ones. So it's pretty good, and all for free, and even high resolution, right? Going back to what we have, if we want to keep the lighting, but we want to get rid of the background, easy way is going to dome light and check in the options. Make sure you check invisible. Okay? And you won't get it as a background. You go to your dome light, you open options here at the bottom, and you check invisible. Cool? And then you can check invisible for the background as well, and you can change the color of the background once again. If it's white, let's bring this to 100. And this is white. Okay? Then, so, is this clear for everyone how HDRI works? Let's say that you want to change a bit of the lighting. You want to keep the same HDRI, but the lighting needs to rotate a bit.
Guys, we're just going through quickly. Keep going, that's great.
We're recording. We're recording.
Yeah.
We are recording.
Sorry.
Great to see you.
What are you teaching them?
Rendering. VRay. All of these is going to be recorded. Okay. Cool. Almost there. All right. I hope what you have on the screen looks pretty much same as I have it. Maybe even better. Why not? More or less there. But I just want to make sure you guys get that. That's not set. Let's say like you got your HDRI in. And still this doesn't really look great. You still have the option, and for this reason I'm going to going back to the lighting, dome light, and I'm going to unswitch invisible so you can see what's happening behind you. You still have the option to rotate this dome, right? And get a different effect. Not just in the background, but also the way the light is bouncing on your object. So in order to do that, you want to click to the texture that is attached to color texture HDR,
And you want to go to texture placement, and in here you have rotation. Actually, I would rather do rotate down here in 2D transformation. No. Okay. Yeah, don't do it here. It depends on how this is set up. Like in this case, you don't want to rotate from here. You want to find, yeah, it's rotate H in this case. This is the right axis for us. And you see that the sky is rotating around my object, giving different results. Okay? Yep. How do you open the asset? Intensity, but also you can balance the intensity or exposure in the camera. If you lower it, you get. If you lower it, you get better because it's a very tiny amount and that drastically changes the one. So bring it to let's say Okay, everyone. So HDRI lighting, you see that we're starting getting more realistic results. You can play with the ones that I provided. You can download more. The good thing is also if you have a let's say like your project, your studio project, as a specific type of environment, you can look into 360 degrees images that have that sort of environment, and that can become your HDRI. Right? If you can't find a preset HDRI, you can even make your own. There is like it's like a free tool you can use online, which you basically manage to get into a world map and find where 360 pictures has been taken, and grab that and use it as an HDRI if you can find one about your site or something that looks like your site, right? So that's an option. Cool. I'll say what I want to show you next is Chaos Cosmos. Super cool. Try and open it and say what it says to you. I'm 100% sure it's not going to work, but I'm just going to show you so you get an idea. If I go to VRay here and open Chaos Cosmos, which is exactly the second button, Chaos Cosmos. Okay, it's loading. I'll get, there is another update. Okay, I'll get a series of assets that I can download for free. I introduced this during the presentation. Basically is HDRIs as well. So once again, we have HDRIs here. We have materials. We also do have architecture, vehicles, lighting, furniture, vegetation. Let's say I want to bring a tree in here. So, and you see, this is exactly what I was talking about. They constantly update these libraries. So these are all new, apparently. They came overnight. I can search for trees. I can click on vegetation and search specifically for trees. And maybe let's get this new tree in here. All I do, I click on the download button. It will download, and then I get this arrow to bring it in my project. Let me position it a bit better, and then let's rerun the right button. And you see now the tree is in there. Pretty cool. you can do it on the fly. You can add, say, people standing, and it will be fully texturized. Okay? Have you tried it?
Would they have to sign it?
Sorry?
It's asking for a sign.
Exactly. So basically what you need to do, and you can do it with your own email, your personal email, doesn't matter. You need to create a profile on the website, and then you will need to link it. The thing is, I'm still not sure, even if you build a profile now, you can try. Try and create a quick profile now, and then try and see if you can link it to the computer. But I do believe, since you don't have admin rights on these computers, you can't do. Those of you who are using your own laptop at the moment, they can try, you can try as well, and see if it works. But you see, it's great. It's really great, it's super handy. You can create stunning visuals, really realistic ones. Like even like let's say that I'm not super happy with how my grass is looking at the moment. I want to get it even more realistic results. I can start and grab, say, vegetation, some of these new assets. Oh, this is really small. Yeah, that's not gonna do much. Okay, they're super small. Well, the good thing is I can also come in here and scale this guy. Okay, now it's difficult. It's not visible just because we are in this sort of like night view. But if I turn on sunlight for a moment, something you shouldn't do. Once again, as you can see that now the lights are clashing, right? It doesn't make any sense that we have the dome light plus the sunlight. Okay, so you see how well these assets are reacting to light. So this is great for your project. They can look really cool with almost no effort, right? So I would suggest everyone to sign up and find a way to connect to Chaos Cosmos. It's free once you have VRay. Okay, this is pretty much the last thing I wanted to show you before we run a proper render, which is the next step. All right, so let's say that I'm more or less happy with this type of lighting and with this type of view. And this is what I want to render. All right, I position myself first. Then there are a couple of things that I can do on the Rhino viewport, which are, if I go in the properties, I have a lens length that right now is set to 50. I can tweak this a bit, maybe 35. I think it's a good length. It gives me more of a perspective feeling. And then other thing that I can do in here is, oh, sorry. Let me copy these, at least I get some vegetation around. I'm just doing super fast and quite random, quite in a random way. Okay, anyway. You decide how to frame it. And then one thing you might want to do to better understand the type of rendering, the type of picture that is coming out of this render is if you open, once again, you go back to your asset editor and you're in the settings, you open your camera settings. Down here, where is that? Render output. You have the possibility to switch off save frame. I'll suggest everyone to do it. So this is adding this frame in your viewport. So it's telling you exactly what is being rendered, what is being left out with these gray bands, right? You can change the size in here. You can change the size of your image. You can set, now I'm gonna turn these off. And then I'm switching this to actual render. Oh, actually, let me stop this. Okay, and I'm gonna set the quality. So the quality for now, medium is fine. I don't want this to take too much. Actually, I'm gonna reduce it to low plus. I don't want this to take too much, just to show you the results. Exposure value is fine. Depth of field, you guys know what depth of field is. I think we are not going to introduce it now. It doesn't make much sense, especially because I want to have a good view range of my scene. The render output is set to 1920 to 1080. That's totally fine with me. I can get it to be a portrait. I can change. I show you how to change the ratio for the image size as well. The only thing that I'm left to do is to define where I'm going to save the image. So if I click in here, I can input the file path, which in my case is going to be the desktop, and I'm going to give you a name. It can be a PNG, it can be a JPEG, up to you really. I'm going to do PNG because I also do have the possibility with PNG to render a channel for the background and being able then, say like in Photoshop and other post-production software, to crop it out. So how do you add channels? There is one thing called render elements right here. I can click in here. In here, you can decide what are the channels that you want to add to your scene. So basically, VRay will not only render the final image, but it will also give you all these channels as separate images if you select them. So let's say I want background. Right, it says what it does in here in the properties. I might want to add a object ID, render ID, material ID, why not? Whatever you need, right? You might want to have reflections or ambient occlusion. Just be conscious that now when you render, you'll be rendering those channels as well. So let's say I'm ready to render. I press in here, render with VRay, and then I just wait. Oh, sorry. Let me close it for a moment. I think I checked progressive. I don't want this to be progressive. So there'll be a limited number of passes that it does, which is set by my quality, which is low at the moment. When you play with very low quality, you might want to have a denoiser on. That will get rid of all the noise. Not switching it off for now. I just want to see how long it takes to do it with these settings. So I'm just going to play again. And you see that now it's not anymore about the progressive render, but it's rendering the final image. And we do have a progress bar here that is telling us pretty much how long it's left before we're done with the image. Okay, finished. There is still something that you can do before moving to Photoshop or other software. You can still do it in VRay. Here on the right, you get a series of layers. There are post-production layers, and if you click in here, create layer, you get few possible layers that you might want to play with, like exposure, white balance, and so on. It's not as great as Photoshop, of course, but it's great to give it a first touch, something that you can always go back, switch it on and off. So now I have like display correction. I have a lens effect. No, this is off. The noiser is unavailable because we didn't turn it on. I can add a color balance layer to this, and I can play maybe with the mids and slightly change the tones. I don't know if that's visible through the monitors. And then you can always go back to File and save current channel, and this will be the one that you retouched a bit, right? Other than that, if I go to my desktop, let me see. Well, it didn't really work. Why? Okay, this worked. So this is that just gave me the ID channel. So I get a different ID for each item, each geometry, which is quite cool. Then it's very easy to pick and select them and mask them in Photoshop. That's not what I'm looking for. The final image is here. Nice. Yes, of course, this is super low quality. It took no time. I could have applied a denoiser here, and it would have sorted nicely, like keeping the time very restricted. It would have nicely fixed all this kind of blur happening in the image. Yes?
Sorry, how did you export both? Like both the masking one and the render?
You mean the ID? You mean I export both the channels and
yeah, like you had that image of like all the masking as well?
That came from the channels that I add, which are here, the layers. So it is probably the object ID. For some reason, the material ID didn't come. But yeah, I think that was either the object or the render ID. Just to make sure, I will just select both. And then I think we are left with not much time, but I just want to show you one last thing. That let's say you have your nice, so we're not going to get to animation, but that's fine. It's pretty much the same process as when you do an animation in Rhino, and then all you do, you go in VRay, and then automatically VRay recognizes that there is an animation going on. So it's going to ask you, like what are the frames that you're rendering, what is the folder where you're exporting the frames, and so on. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to show you how to quickly turn your realistic model into more of an abstract model. And there is a very quick way, which is, let me first delete all of this, because next time I render, I don't want to see them. There is a quick way, which is turning these on. You go to Settings, right? In here, And you down here, you'll find this material override. If you switch this on, you'll keep the same lighting, but you will have one material which will be overridden on top of all the others, right? So you can create sort of like almost like a physical model looking like object. Maybe here, what I want to do, I want to turn off the dome light and turn on the document, the Rhino document sun, reducing it a bit. 0.2, maybe. Okay, and then I'm going to switch off the Rhino document ground plane. Then let me go back to the settings here. Environment. Let's turn these into black. Sorry, I need to fix on the fly the exposure. Okay, and then maybe I can also introduce a clipping plane. Make it vertical, V. I'm creating another one, flipping it. Okay, and then I should be having clipping planes here, and I can use a different material for where the cuts are happening. So I go to clipping plane, I do use object material and switch it. Material, I need to create a new one, so I'm going to material and create a generic one. Sorry, materials, generic. I call it, double click on it, and I call it section. And maybe this will be, I don't know, like red. And then I go back in the object where my clipping plane is, and I assign a material, I assign the section material in here. Does that work? No? Maybe here? Weird, it's not working. Ah, okay, of course it's not working because I'm overwriting all the materials. So if I go back to the settings and I go here, material override. So unfortunately, that's a material that I can't keep when I'm using the override material option, I believe. Other than that, if I select, for instance, the water, let's say, so the water material, I go to water, where is it? Here. I can do right click. Sorry, no. There should be options for it. Oh, sorry, it was right here. Can be overridden. If you uncheck this, you'll see that the water is kept. Same goes with every material. So I take my grass p, can be overwritten, uncheck, and I get the grass. And this is a very quick way to create abstract images. Let's say maybe I want to show a bit of the, I don't know, the interiors. Either I add a clipping plane, or I add these, or I hide these geometries. Okay, so this can become a very diagrammatic view, which I'm ready to render. You might still want to play a bit with the sun position. Wow, it's taking forever. Okay. And then once again, we're going to render this, but this time I want to check the denoiser. So I'm going to switch, turn this off. And say denoiser, we turn it on. All right, and we go to output, save image. We give it a different name. Enter. And we render it. This should be even faster, and then the denoiser should give us another pass of cleaning up and polishing the result. Of course, if you manage to get to the final render you want, right? You don't need to render it at low res. You can pump up the resolution, and you won't even need the denoiser to come in and clean it up. But I think in no time, this is actually not a bad result. Okay. I think that's pretty much it for today's session. If you have any question, in any case, you're always going to have the recordings, right? So you can rewatch the recordings. But if you have any questions, you want me to walk around, I'm also happy to walk around now. I'm just going to stop the recording for now.